Hello and welcome to the RIBA Climate Action in Asia webinar series. I'm Itiong Lim, RIBA Singapore Chapter Chairman and Studio Director of Gensler Singapore. The webinar series today is a collaboration between the RIBA Hong Kong and Singapore chapters with the support from RIBA International. We bring together professionals and experts across the innovative value chain in the built environment from Singapore, Bangkok, and Hong Kong to this webinar. We'll be sharing unique insights into how we can collectively and through our actions address the ongoing climate crisis in Asia. And my fellow co-host for today's event, Louise.
Hi everyone, my name's Louise. Thank you Itiong for the introduction. My name's Louise, I'm the Director of Environments at ATINC in Hong Kong studio and also a member of the Hong Kong RIBA chapter committee. I think I'm going to take you quickly through the agenda. Today we have three speakers. We have Dr. Senaka Basnayake. He's a director of the Climate Resilience Department and the Asia Disaster Preparedness Center in Bangkok. We have Dr. Tony Lam, Director of Sustainability at ARUP in Hong Kong, and also Dr. Hussain Razai, a structural engineer and founding member of Construction Declares in Singapore. So we'll go through each of those speakers, and at the end we'll have a question and answer session. So feel free to post your questions on the Q&A section on the top bar on the screen. And yeah, we'll go to the first speaker. So first up, we have Dr. Senaka Basnayake, and he will be speaking about urban resilience to climate extremes within the Asia region.
Yeah, thanks for the nice introduction. So I'm going to talk about urban resilience to climate extremes. So the resilient buildings is a kind of like, way of adapting to climate change, or and as well as its extremes. We know, from various reports, the climate change is now a reality. Then it is happening. It will continue to the future as well. For example, the assessment report, 6th assessment report, which was released last year as well as this year, 3 publications. It is mentioned that the limits set with this Paris Agreement in 2015. To control the temperature way below 2 degrees, it may not be possible. Maybe 1.5 centigrade might be also reaching maybe the mid-century. So it's kind of really alarming. So there are many ways and many ways to sort of reduce the risk. So one of them, of course, the adaptation, as well as, of course, mitigation is also needed, but it's a kind of it takes time to reduce the impact. Even if you cut off all the emissions today, so with the availability of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the temperature will continue to increase. So it is so important for us to make some sort of adaptation measures. So I selected this, the topic urban context. And before getting into that, a brief intro to my organization, ASEAN Disaster Preparedness Center. It is an international autonomous international organization with a sort of vision on safer communities and sustainable development through disaster risk reduction. We have been functioning in the region for nearly 36 years, headquarters in Bangkok, Thailand, and we have a couple of the country as well as project officers. So if you look at this, the scenario, the population. So from 1950 to 2050, as you can see here, it is really increasing the urban population. As of 2015, so according to the statistics, so the global sort of urban population is 54% against 46 global rural populations. But it may be not the case in future. By 2030, it might reach to 61. That is a global urban population. So it is it is very much important for us to think maybe the urban settings because of the population increase, the growth, as well as the infrastructure in order to understand and reduce the climate as well as disaster risks. So there are a couple of global instruments, so we call global frameworks. So when it comes to disaster risk reductions, probably you all know the Sendai framework for disaster risk reductions. It was ratified by many governments 2015. So we have a 15-year period till 2030. So it has set for priorities, understanding risk, as well as strengthening disaster risk governance, investing in disaster risk reduction, as well as enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response. So with that, actually, there are a couple of other global frameworks. Everybody knows about the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. So I have just selected 11 because there are 17, of course. That is actually talks about the cities, as well as if you take 13, it is a climate action. So when it comes to very much urban or city, so the Habitat 3, it was it came to in effect 2016. So we just recently completed the World Urban Forum, the third World Urban Forum in Europe. So these are a couple of global instruments for the provide guidance, the strategic the guidance for the countries and the countries to take forward. Let's try to understand what is disaster. Because hazards are of course coming. So in future we are expecting more and more intense and more frequent probably. And of course it also depends on if we have if the system is susceptible, as well as if the exposure is high, as well as the coping capacity is less, there is a risk. So hazard is coming. So if the system doesn't have if the system is more vulnerable and more exposed and less capacity, so that's a risk to have disaster. And if there is any disaster, it leads to losses in lives and lifeline other facilities as well, livelihoods as well as assets. So this is the equation that popular one. Actually, you can see that now in order to risk is depending on hazard, vulnerability, as well as the exposure and coping capacity. So there are ways and means to reduce risk, because hazard may not be probably we don't have much liberty to do, but we can reduce the vulnerability, we can reduce the coping exposure, and we can increase the coping capacity. And while doing so, if you reduce the risk, of course, so we can probably think of to build more resilient systems when it comes to urban similar way. So if the system is resilient, it doesn't take much time to bounce back to normal level. But if the system is not resilient, it takes more time to bounce back. Sometimes it may not be the case. It may not come to the same level. And this is about disaster management cycle. You can see that now the first one, you can see the first half, risk management. So there are certain activities that probably we can take forward and to protect, starting with mitigation and prevention. And probably we can do a lot of preparedness measures. And then of course, one of the good example prediction and early warning systems for maybe the national or even subnational organization to issue forecast warnings in timely manner. So after the disaster, the latter part, the lower part is very much crisis management. Once it happened, of course, the impact assessment is needed. So maybe the people, the government are, or even the CSOs and other people are, deploying response mechanisms. And then after that, of course, we need to work on the recovery, reconstruction, and then it goes to the, so with the learning, so we can go back to the other side, that's the protection. So as I was trying to mention, we can reduce the risks. So we can reduce, if we can reduce the risk, so maybe we can we don't need to do much we can protect the people or the systems or the infrastructure associated in that particular area, or in this the particular case what I'm talking about, the urban. So let's assume maybe in particular area in urban setting, so we have SMEs, so we have people or even the critical infrastructure, or even maybe in the suburb areas, the farming community. As I was trying to explain you, of course, these are risk environments. hazards are there. Maybe it could be floods, or the riverine floods, or the storm surge, or the coastal flooding if it is the city is near to the coast, and the strong winds associated with cyclones, or up to certain extent, like drought as well. And the exposure pattern is also important. So these are in addition to that, vulnerability of that particular systems. These are sort of some sort of resilient building measures. If we are if you want to improve the systems or the resilience, so probably there are ways and means to do. The most important thing I would say that governance system. So maybe the people have been working so hard, but if the system, that particular municipality or the local area, if the governance system doesn't really support, we may not be able to do much. And then land use management, good practices actually is one of the sort of we can think of reducing risks. And the early warning systems, maybe there are, of course, each and every country or each and every city. So, but maybe the warning information doesn't really reach to the grassroots level on time. So there are gaps, especially sub-national to local level. So we need to make some sort of improvement and get this, the maybe private sector engagement in order to improve this type of early warning systems. And build up area environment improvement. So there is very much important sort of nowadays we have been talking, and other speakers might also be talking about maybe the cities green cities, the concept this and that, and of course economic opportunities. If you take this all, so that is actually very much on urban disaster risk management. This is the framework that we have been using, of course, so we can make some improvements or to reduce the impacts, the risks. And I thought of putting this one just because as I started talking about sort of resilience, city resilience. So city resilience index, this was proposed by ARUP with maybe funding from Rockefeller. So it's a kind of to measure the overall resilience. So there are 4 domains, 12 goals, 52 indicators. It's a bit messy. Probably you may not be able to see very clearly, but this is sort of overall resilience measuring index. What I'm going to present now is the one of the projects that is in Disaster Preparedness Center we have been implementing with the funding from NORAD. So urban resilient to climate extremes. So we have we have come up with some sort of the areas interventions, improving early warning systems, maybe improving community engagement and the readiness, and the risk sectoral preparedness and risk governance. So these are the key 4 areas that we have put it in this the project in order to improve. And of course it's also important for us to work on knowledge products and peer-to-peer learning, the experiences among countries and across countries as well. So we have selected a couple of cities, 2 cities in Vietnam, Mae Tho and the Nam Dinh. One to the north, one to the south, but those are all these cities are coastal cities, and one in Myanmar, that is in Yangon. These are the sort of selected areas. So the upper panel, it shows some of the results that we have done so far. So we prepared a sort of risk profile or the risk map. As you can see, the upper panel, so the exposure information is there. Vulnerability curves are there, actually that is for the storm surge. And this one actually you can see that no risk. You can see the red patches, the red areas, I mean the buildings. So these are very much exposed. The risk is very high in those areas, and this especially the buildings. And the lower panel, it shows, of course, the assessment that we have done in this particular area. There's a Myanmar, of course, about the early warning system. So we made some assessments about the early warning system in order to understand gaps and needs, and then make some adjustments or the improvements. Similar thing we did in Vietnam. So we are still working on that. Actually, we have collected exposure data. We have done some sort of hazard assessment. I think we are now working on the risk assessment. Similarly, you can see that the lower panel. So we have also done sort of early warning system assessment in Vietnam. So compared to Myanmar, of course, the systems are somewhat advanced. That's obvious. So still there are some gaps in order to improve. So in addition to that, this whole project, as it is important for us to exchange sort of lot knowledge or the lesson learned. So we have been conducting several webinars like this one, of course, and then we have conducted some trainings as well. These are some of the slides And there's some of the interventions in both the countries to work with the cities officials as well as to work with the real communities for them to understand what we have been trying to do, what we have. That's also important, very much important for them to get better understanding so that now they can contribute in order to improve the systems. If you need more information about this project, you can get more information through this link of this, the ADPC, this link to ADPC website. There's a web page for that particular the project. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Dr. Senaka, for your presentation and really about sort of like understanding that climate change is here to stay. But the things that how do we then equip cities to be adaptable? And for our next speaker, we have Dr. Tony Lam. Dr. Tony Lam is an award-winning engineer. He's a director of climate and sustainability at ARUP. As a sustainability specialist, he has extensive experience in tackling environmental impacts on the built environment, particularly in implementing low carbon, wellness, and healthy developments. He is a green design expert and has completed a number of exemplar sustainable projects in Asia Pacific, and which includes one of which is the CIC Zero Carbon Building, ZCB in Hong Kong. And Dr. Tony Lam.
So thanks for the introduction. So I'm Tony from ARUP Hong Kong, from the ARUP Climate and Sustainability. So today, the topic I'd like to share is the climate-centric design for a high-rise building, for the new building. So a bit of the background that recently the World Women Council initiated the Advancing Net Zero activity, which will talk about regarding the building is the whole life carbon vision. So that is two important components. One at the left-hand side will be the operational carbon, and at the right-hand side you see the embodied carbon. So there are two milestones that we are having this journey. So from now to 2030, that we hope that's the buildings and the infrastructure that can have at least a 40% reduction of the embodied carbon compared to today's performance. And also all the new buildings that has to be designed and operated with the net zero operational carbon. And to the longer target, long-term target, 2050, that's all the new buildings, infrastructure, and renovations that have to have a net zero embodied carbon, and also that all the existing buildings that have net zero operational carbon. That would be the target and initiative from the World Green Building Council to tackle on the climate change. So a little bit of what that I on my team that has been working on to respond to the decarbonization initiative from the World Green Building Council. So recently in the industry in the East Asia, we are working on these 5 numbers of the areas. So starting with the left-hand side, the number 1 is we are looking into the existing building stock and looking at the energy performance. So conducting a series of the benchmarking exercise. So that's the company. Say the company, they have a numbers of the properties. They can identify which property in their portfolio that we need to set the high priority to take the action. So number 2 is more on the target setting for the company scale, company level. That's to set up the carbon reduction roadmap. So you may heard the science-based targets, how the company can take the action and also do the investments to achieve the 1.5 degrees limit for the carbon reduction target setting. And number 3 would be more on the digital technology application with the carbon decarbonization design. So that's no matter for the new building and existing building, we are helping on the building that to provide a reliable digital infrastructure, so that all along the life cycle of the building, we can track the performance of the carbon emission for the building, so that we can review and identify the key action to have a better performance. So the fourth area is more on the project of the building project that's on technical and engineering design that can facilitate for the zero carbon building. And number 5 would be that this kind of driver that's for green investment activity, that how to look at the ESG or the carbon performance of those properties that can help on the financial activities. For example, for the investment, that's kind of the carbon reduction performance due diligence exercise. So just briefly, that's what we are responding to the industry and the markets on the climate change action. So focusing on the today topic, I mentioned about the new high-rise building in Asia. So as we are now in the here in Asia, like Hong Kong, Singapore, or the Greater China. So we feature a series of the urban development and also high density configuration of our urban area. So we see a lot of like high-rise building here, and also that we also experience I think that the consequences from the climate change. There's some extreme weather like the rainfall and typhoon and the high temperature, etc. And also the context that recently that normally that the new building, the developer or the stakeholder, they're expecting for a better provision or better quality, that they have a high expectation in the wellness level of the building. For example, the Class A office. So that these are also the challenge, that the high density, extreme weather, and also the high expectation of the building. So this would give a challenge to the decarbonization exercise of the building. And the right hand side is also some factor recently that I dig out from the statistics in Hong Kong. In the entire city, that's 70% of the carbon emission is from the electricity, and 60% from the transport, and the rest is from others like the waste. And for those 70% of the electricity, that's inside this 90% is from building. So the building plays a very important role in the carbon reduction exercise. So a bit recap on the sustainable development of the building or urban context. So in the year 2000, that millennium year, that we more focusing on the energy efficiency, and then come to that's the next 10 years that we look at the high performance. That's how we make use of the space, how we make the best use of the energy to provide the best environment or environmental quality. And in the last few years, that we pay more attention on the kind of like people-centric design of the building. That's you may heard that's the WELL building certification, or we focus on the topic on the health and well-being design in the building. And to the recent years, that's 1 to 2 years recently, that's getting more people or the general public have awareness of the climate change. So that's I think that would be the era that we need to look at the climate-centric design of a building. So this I think that for the new generation of the sustainable building, we need to looking at these 3 key elements. One would be regarding the resilience, that how it responds to the climate change, how we adapt to the climate change consequences. And the blue one would be the mitigation. So we also try to limit the temperature rise globally, and also conduct the decarbonization exercise. And the green ball is the adaptation in terms of how we live together with the change of the climate, and also we got our change in design, our behavior change, so that can facilitate the wellness design of a building. So these are three very key elements in the coming years for the new building projects. So today I like to make a case study that share with all of you. It's a high-rise building in Hong Kong. It's called the Swire 2 Taikoo Place. So it's an award-winning project that awarded with the Grand Award of the Hong Kong Green Building Award 2021. And it locates in Hong Kong. It's an office building with 42 stories, and also have 15 stories of the basement levels. So it's targeting on the certification, the BIMPAS new building, which is the local in Hong Kong here, the green building certification, and the US-based LEED certification, as well as the WELL certification that's target to have the platinum. So they we have already achieved the professional and pre-certification, and also the remaining is the reset air. That's more on the performance of the air quality. So here's some image for this project. Actually, this project is under the construction at the moment. So you can see at the left-hand side, it features apart from the office tower, it also have like a big garden that can promote the biophilic design on the activities here in the working environment. And also you can see the big volume lobby areas to maintain the wellness performance of the project. And that on the left-hand side, you see the tower. Actually, that at the second floor, that there is a sky garden that can provide the extra outdoor space within the building for the occupants. So start with the resilient design. So we conduct a series of the measures responding to these four key elements in the site. That's the site area of this project, which including the heat stress, the wind stress, water stress, and flooding. For example, for the heat stress, we were looking at the surrounding context and environment, and then we conduct the microclimate to maintain a better ventilation so that we can remove heat in the summertime. And also, as mentioned, that we provide the sky gardens and also the greenery. That's the outdoor garden. That's to reduce the heat island effect. So for the wind stress, through the computer modeling, that we also apply the high strength glass to the envelope system, which is can tackle for the typhoon signal number 10. And also that's for water stress and flooding. We provide currently water saving or water recycling facility, and also have the stormwater management to adapt to the flooding issue in the future. So about the wellness design, which is the very high demand from the user nowadays for the urban context. So there's mainly two parts in the wellness strategy here in this project. One would be we call the COVID alignment design, which have a series of the touchless experience. Here is an example that we have the total touchless toilet that for the process that open the door, main door, cubicle door, or also the flush or the toilet lid. So all are the touchless. So we integrate this kind of system in the toilet interior design. And also at the right hand side is very important is the air quality, and also quite important in Hong Kong here. That's the urban area. That's the outdoor air quality may be a concern. So we apart from the filtering system and the fresh air system, the HVAC provision, we also include a series of the indoor air quality monitoring throughout the whole building, so that we can have a precise appreciation of the air quality, so we can provide the quick response for those areas that the air quality is cannot provide a good performance, so that we can do some control, like the control of the fresh air amount or the air purifier. So at the bottom is other aspects for the visual quality in terms of wellness, like the selection of the lighting system and also the facade. That's how can it maintain the very good like view of the user in the interior space. And I've just mentioned there's 2 sky gardens putting in the building that provide the area with the connection to the nature, with the natural ventilation, the greenery, and the view. So that would be the space that can let the user to have some leisure activity, and also during the office hour have like casual discussion there. So so start with the mitigation, the decarbonization. I'd like to introduce the terms that's the whole life cycle carbon assessment that we conduct in this project. So here you see the bar is the life cycle of the project. So starting with the design to the final demolition. So at the design stage of a new building, that we suggest to have like target setting in terms of the embodied carbon and the operational carbon of this building project. So the embodied carbon can be related to the structural efficiency design and also the selection of the materials. And for the operational carbon, that's certainly we need to look at the like passive design. That's how we work well with the microclimate, and also a series of the energy efficiency system and the renewable energy system, which I will touch on later. And also that's very important to look at the waste management system as well. So during the construction stage, that is also very important, because in the design stage, we have specified lots of the materials and system, but actually during that construction, say 4 to 5 years, that some materials that we expect may not be available at that time and moment. So we need to have a very good tracking system, checking on the materials submission from the contractor, so that all the project team can check on the performance. Say, for example, at some juncture of time, that's the expected concrete from nearby is not available, so we need to buy the concrete from like a very long distance, and then that will introduce a larger carbon emission, so that we should have a very good tracking system to see how the carbon emission performance at the moment, so we can need to find any other chance to do it better and make it on track. And after construction, that's hand over to the operational stage. That's we also need a very good digital system to check on the operational performance, including the electricity metering and the air quality and water consumption, so that we can ensure the performance during the operation, and also how we find the opportunities to do it better. And at the end, with the demolitions, that think about the circularity and the reuse of the materials. So here are some highlight of the strategy that we apply in 2 types of ways. For example, for the passive design, we put effort on the envelope. We consider the solar environment there and identify the suitable glass selection, which have a higher visible light transmittance and also have a very good solar protection activity. So you can see some image at the right hand side is we try to optimize the daylight availability, and at the same time to reduce the solar heat gain through the external shading fins and also the good low glass. So it's quite hard in subtropical Hong Kong to using solely the passive design to offset the operational carbon. so that we still need to turn on the air conditioning in the hot and humid season, and also turn on the lighting. So that will be a series of the energy efficient system we consider, no matter in the like water side and air side of the HVAC system, and also the lighting and lift and escalator system. And the challenge in the high-rise building is the application of the renewable energy. You know that the roof area is quite limited. So apart from the the photovoltaic and the small wind turbine we can apply on the rooftop, we also apply the new concept of the using the waste cooking oil as the fuel. That's to drive the generator to produce the electricity and also the heat. So the heat can feed to the absorption chiller to provide the cooling for the building. So that's why we call this is the tri-generation system. So make use of the biodiesel, that is the waste cooking oil, and then we can produce the clean electricity and also drive for the cooling and the hot water. So at the right hand side bottom, you'll see a small table. This is the like expected energy use intensity of the building, which is how each square meter of the floor area consume the energy in the future per year. So now the number is 76 kilowatt hour per meter square per year, which is considered as the top class in the Hong Kong like benchmarking system. And also touch on the the construction activity. That's we make use of the left-hand side is the entertainer, which is a large energy storage system that we can make use of the electricity to produce the energy for our construction activity, which effectively reduce our on-site carbon emission during the construction period. And also, having mentioned is the green procurement, that's the selection of the green materials with low carbon content. So finally, that we also put on the expect for the operational stage. We have the performance checking digital system that to monitor each the carbon emission parameter. So to facilitate in the future, the operator can observe the performance of carbon emission of the building. So here the summary that to close up is the climate-centric design. We consider three main elements, which is the resilience that respond to the climate change, and also the adaptation in terms of the wellness design. And lastly, the mitigation, which we consider the embodied carbon, operational carbon, as well as the performance checking in the operation stage. So thanks. So here is my presentation.
I think we need to quickly go to our next speaker, who will be Dr. Hossan Rizai. He's a structural engineer, design visionary, and also an educator, and a founding member of Construction Declares in Singapore. Dr. Hossan, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Let me upload my slides. I'd ask for a bit of leeway to talk about a slightly wider subject and talk about Bronton Report, one of the most important documents we have produced in the past 50 or 100 years relating to our relationship with the environment. And of course, it is about Brunton Report and whether it was a saint or a sinner. As I was putting the deck of slides for this presentation together, I also a couple of days ago came across this quote by a gentleman called Adam Carell, whom I don't know personally, but he's a partner of EY Australia, and he said, in the quest for sustainable development, the only thing more dangerous than the absence of progress is the illusion of it. And I think that this really resonated with me and with the type of projects that we see happening around us, some of which we are involved with as well, and whether we are deluding ourselves with the environmental credentials of these buildings, or are we getting real progress, or is there no progress at all? Now, putting these two ideas of Brunton Report and these quotes, these two thought strings together, and going back to the title, obviously, we all know Brunton Report Commission was put together from 1983 to 87. It was a UN initiative to deal with the then hole in the ozone layer and the general global warming. They were given a brief to come up with solutions for our environmental woes, while not compromising global economic development. And there lies, in my opinion, an oxymoron in the brief. But the Commission gallantly went ahead and after 3 years produced this report called Our Common Future, more famously known as the Brunton Report. One of the key things with the report is that it defined sustainable development at that time, almost for the first time, brought the idea of sustainability and the word sustainability into the mainstream gradually. And the definition then was a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. I think implicit and explicit in this definition is an officiation of a separation of us as one species and the natural environment. And I think that is a fundamental flaw. With hindsight, in that document, in that approach, a flaw that continues to run through almost everything we are doing and we have done in the past 35 years to do with sustainable development, etc., where the natural environment is seen as a resource that we are allowed and in fact encouraged to use, but not to be greedy and use as much as we need and leave for the rest of it to be used by our future generations, rather than inviting us to be integral with the natural environment as we used to be and as we ought to be. Looking at a few drivers, parameters, environmental parameters before and after Brunton Report, say the CO2 equivalent parts per million, the famous graph of the density going up, has been going up for the past 800,000 years. Of course, it's not the fault of Brunton Report. But when you look at let's say the past 200 years, in 1790, the number was 278 parts per million. In 84, it was 345. Now, in 2021, and now it is 416. You see, in about 190 years, between 1790 and 1984, it went up by 67 points, 67 parts. In the preceding 35 years, only 35 years since Brunton, it's gone up by 71. The tendency on the right-hand side of this graph is worse than right-hand side of the Brunton Report line, is worse than the one before. Sarah Ichioka and Michael Polin, in their fantastic book called Flourish on the Environment, they intimate that something like 50% of all the greenhouse gases that humanity has emitted into the environment has happened after Brunton Report. Looking at the actual absolute numbers of greenhouse gases in gigatons related to the energy sector, which is a major part of the total greenhouse gas emissions. Just after the Second World War in 1946, it was 4.63 gigatons per year. It continuously went up. In 1988, it was 22.1, and now It is about 36.4, coming up to 40 gigaton. You could draw a straight line through it. And where you draw the Brunton Report, the tendency before that and tendency after that has no difference. There is no discernible difference in our behavior, in our actual work to do with reducing our adverse impact on the environment. There's no change noticed in data and in facts. The graph that you have all seen, again, parts per million, we're going back from 1960 till now, and the various initiatives by very good people, well-intentioned people. First World Climate Conference in 1979, first IPCC report in 1990, first UN Climate Change Conference 95, Kyoto Protocol 2005, Copenhagen Accord, Paris Agreement, and as recently as last year, the COP26. You see, all these initiatives are happening as if they're happening on a different world, on a different graph. The impact on the environment is not discernible with these environments. And I just wonder whether we are deluding ourselves that we are, with the sort of work that we are doing, that we are actually getting any closer to a proper solution along these lines to our environmental woes. Another driver, biodiversity, has gone down. It's been decimated. You know, since 1970s, it's gone down by 68% on average. In some areas, the Amazon forest has gone down by 94%. We've decimated the biodiversity, and Bronton Report is here. Before and after it, there isn't any discernible difference or tendency. Global loss in forest fires since the Bronton Report is a straight line going down. Now, that is in terms of our relationship with the environment. But even our relationship within our own interspecies, us inequality within us, which is one of the drivers in the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, for instance, now. Share of total income going to the top 1% since 1900. Graph going down means we are becoming more equal. Going up means we are becoming less equal for various countries. And Bronton Report was published here. I'm not saying that Bronton Report is contributing to this thing. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it is definitely doesn't seem to be having any major effect on reducing it, if it ever intended to do that. So having said that, wherever we were, where we are now, we obviously have a choice. We can either continue along these lines of sustainable this, sustainable that, certification here, certification there. And you look at global greenhouse gas emissions, the same graph. The future is, there is a future of deniers. There is no problem. We don't need any solutions. We just carry on as we are. The planet gets warm every couple of million years, and then it gets cool by itself. That is a path of the deniers, leads to, by the end of the century, to about 4 to 5 degrees temperature rise, which is disastrous, we all know. There is a path of the optimizers, which is a sustainable one. Don't be as bad as doing nothing, do something. Be less bad, as it were. The temperature rise projections is about 2.9 degrees. As you probably all know, if all the promises made at the COP26 are delivered upon, the projected temperature rise is 2.2 degrees. And we know that by past experience that not all the promises will be delivered upon. So we are looking at 2.9 to 3 degrees with our best endeavors at the moment. Not good enough. Within that, construction waste in 2025 is going to be 1.1 billion tons every year. We can continue to demolish buildings and build new, spanking new ones with glass facades, etc., which is the same effect on the environment as if you're setting fire to forests. The global chemical usage is expected to double between 2019 and 2030. In 10 years, 11 years, it's going to double. Most of it is toxic chemical. A big chunk of it is related to the construction industry. So that is the path. of deniers or the sustainable path, if I may intimate with you. There is, however, another path, as we know it, and that's the path to 1.5 degrees, the path of regeneration, the regenerative thinking and regenerative design, which is completely different from the curve and the graph of the sustainable design that we have been pursuing. Whereas the natural environment is rich in shape, form, and wisdom, and very frugal in terms of use of material. There is absolutely no waste in it. Our built environment is rather poor in shapes and forms. Everything is vertical, every angle is 90 degrees, and full of wastage. But we can fuse these two together, and regenerative environment is a built environment which we have to build with the limitations that we continue to have, but underpin it with systems and wisdom that exist in nature, with no waste, with frugal use of energy and materials, and that is the essence of regenerative environment. Now, on the curve of sustainable design, where we have been for many years, the lexicon and the metaphors are still talking about conventional materials, but maybe replacing a little bit of this with a little bit of that, becoming a little bit less bad. They were still talking about gas maybe not being as bad. Should be talking about the traditional design methods, basic design ambitions, single client centricity, monospecies interest, etc. Basically optimizing our inefficient and bad practices that we have developed and have become experts on. Whereas on the sustainable design curve, the lexicon is completely different. We're talking about new materials and composites with a vengeance. We're talking about renewable energy. We're talking about augmented design methods, systems-based development brief, multiplicity of clients, etc., etc. Interest of the unborn, and symbiotic relationship with other disciplines, and that is the path to 1.5 degrees. Now, if you're all fixated with the word sustainability, I have no problem with that, but maybe we can call the curve on the left the old sustainability and the one on the right new sustainability, but it is not a continuation of the same curve. And of course, we have a choice not to be negative about things, and the choice is to be thinking and designing along the line of regenerations. I finish my last slide with a book recommendation, so that to bring the topic back to the climate action in Asia, there are many good examples of regenerative design projects, designed, built, and operated for many years, about 10 years, some of them in Asia, in this book by Nirmal Krishnani, Ecopuncture, Transforming Architecture and Urbanism in Asia. I highly recommend it to you, and ask that you move yourself, your projects and others off the curve of sustainability or the old sustainability onto the curve of regenerative design and thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hussain, Dr. Tony Lam, and Dr. Senaka. The things that today we're very fortunate to have like 3 very great speakers from this part of the world sharing with us. So like very, very broad spectrum topic on sustainability, the things that touched on the design aspect, they touched on the operations, they touched on sort of like mitigation and adaptation. But of course, what's most important, a note from all speakers is climate change is here. We do need to do something. We do need to get into action. And the things that is like, and right now, we would like to go into like the panel, so like discussion hosted by Louise and I, together with our 3 speakers. And it's interesting hearing Dr. Hussain saying that that having coined a new term as an old sustainability and new sustainability, which is regeneration. just, opening up to the speakers, what do you think, in fact is like the biggest challenge, in combating climate change? Maybe you could start with Dr. Senaka, and then Dr. Tony Lam and Dr. Hussein.
Thanks. I think biggest challenge would be actually to get in the action at the ground. As I was mentioning, so there are sort of frameworks, global push is there, couple of frameworks, SFDRR, Paris Agreement, SDGs, urban urban agenda, so and so forth. And there are sort of like several reports which are coming from IPCC, which Dr. Hussein highlighted. So the problem we have actually so regional, there should be sort of like regional push, as well as at the end, of course, the country or the sectors, the government sectors, they need to take actions. It is not probably fully convinced yet, because people countries who are attending global, so representing global meetings, maybe specific to let's say when it comes to disaster risk reduction, SFDRR, so maybe the disaster management ministry is attending. When it comes to Paris Agreement, so and then reporting back to UNFCCC, so Ministry of Climate Change or Ministry of Environment, they are attending. So it is not sort of like penetrate enough to the sector specific organizations. So when it comes to climate sensitive sectors, or like even the urban or even agriculture, water, energy. So what I feel like maybe we have been trying as sort of like global citizens, but through projects and programs. But the main difficulty that we have seen that maybe not very much integrated. The mainstream, so it is not very well mainstreamed. That we need to create interest first, and to get sort of like buy-in through, of course, the government focal points. Let's say like Ministry of Climate Change or the Environment or Disaster Management Organizations. Things are like improving through these global frameworks. So then they need to work on sort of proper governance system. So that we need to change, sort of like come up with some strategies, climate action, climate strategies, this and that, and integration into sort of sectors. This is what I see the sort of like the main challenge or the difficulties that we have been facing. So the projects that we have been implementing with the funding from donors and development partners. So it's a kind of like we used to go there and work with them, and when we sort of like after the project when we withdraw it, I mean the government doesn't take sort of like buy-in the responsibility to continue the same way. Maybe because of the finance ministry probably not involved. So that's again like again the governance issue. I stop here so we can listen to others as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Senaka. Yeah, and to Dr. Lam, Tony Lam, you talked a lot and shared with us a lot about sort of like design, operations, and truly talking about the whole life cycle, of, developments. And we'd like to hear from you, your view.
So thank you. So maybe I focus on the mitigation, which is about the decarbonization. So I think the main challenge, I think, likewise is the drivers. That how is the synergy that we can produce to promote the like low carbon and also the green building design practice or behavior there. So it deal with the the policy, and also would be the driver from the finance activity that would is there any incentive or benefits that can encourage people to design or operate the low carbon building. And also that is very important is the demand. That's is it actually the demand from the community or from the like building user. That's how we can make the influence. So for those that's like a larger group of the people, that we can develop and design a very low carbon, very sustainable green building, but normally that's the building would have other like we call it tenants or user that's engaged in the same building. So for example, if the like building owner themselves, they and want to promote the low carbon building or operation of the project, that's they can only control the so-called common area, the landlord area, but they find hard to control how the tenant, they say the office tower, how the tenant they use their workplace, and also how they consume the resources of produce the carbon emission. So this is the bigger challenge, and also the very clear focus that we need to make more influence. So maybe that we can make use of some technology that can enhance the behavior change, or how we promote more communication between the landlord and the tenants, or different parties. So how we produce the synergy to work together towards the lower carbon future. For example, is the exchange of the performance data. So actually that's the same building, but we separate them into landlord and tenant area. So is there any way that we can exchange on the carbon data, so that all together can review how to work better for the building and produce the same targets to lower the carbon emission? So I think in general, it's more about the influence to the larger community of the people, and how we as a bigger group to work together.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And Dr. Hussain?
Yes, my answer is going to be a little bit more emotive than Tony's. I think what we lack is courage. What we lack is a real conviction in moving, in changing our paradigms. The IPCC report came out. The latest IPCC was full of promises, and rightly so. And I agree with everything it says. The report says that for every environmental problem that we have identified, right now we have a solution. We don't even need to think of new solutions. We actually have solutions for every problem that we have to do with our relationship with the environment. We need to have the courage of moving on with engaging with these solutions. We need to stop looking at each other. This is like the user is not using it properly. I'm designing it well. It's actually the engineer. Oh no, it's the policy maker, etc. But act on these principles, equip ourselves with the ideas of regenerative thinking, regenerative ideas, and act on them wherever we are, individually, professionally, in neighborhoods, in cities, in countries, etc. And I think we can. If we look at some of the examples in eco-puncture, high-rise buildings, like I've mentioned it elsewhere as well. In Singapore, a building designed by Woha Architects, Oasia, downtown. It is a tall building which accommodates a hotel. It complies with the client's brief that he wants a hotel. On day one, the client did not tell them to go and design a hotel that has a green plot ratio of 11. And that the green surfaces of that building, when it's finished, is 11 times the green area of the whole of the plot of land. The brief said, give me a hotel, 4-star, 260 rooms, or as many rooms as it is. But they went and not only satisfied the client's requirement, but also satisfied the climate's requirement. That is a true climate-centric design. And by virtue of that, they have actually greened a neighborhood of 11 plots of land there. We can do it, the solutions are there. And one last thing, if I may say, is that when you see a climate-centric building, you know it's a climate-centric building. When you look at a glass building, high-rise with glass facade, a glass box, you probably don't have a climate-centric building, regardless of all the efforts and things that we put in it. So we need to move away from those genres that we are much more comfortable with because we've been doing them, we've become experts in, and de-learn some of those things and relearn new regenerative design and regenerative thinking.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Hussain.
Great, thank you. some kind of sobering presentations and facts, and we have another question. So climate change is here to stay. So what do you think are the mitigation and adaptation measures for tackling climate change from, either from a local, regional, or even global perspective? So what are the most pressing? Should we start with Dr. Senaka again?
Sure. Yeah. So when it comes to adaptation, of course, as well as mitigation, I think both are important. I was trying to emphasize the fact that when it comes to mitigation, of course, we need to take measures, I would say. So there is a long history, like a couple of decades we have been trying. Like Kyoto Protocol came in, so many things, and recently Paris Agreement. So it's important to reduce greenhouse gas concentration from the atmosphere. So maybe through sinks, or even increasing sinks, as well as maybe reducing sort of like emissions. So that's important. And at the same time, so because now even if you cut off now, which I mentioned earlier, so gases to the atmosphere, the available gases in the atmosphere, which Dr. Hussain was also mentioning, 400 plus parts per million. So the temperature will continue to increase few decades from now. So that's super important, as well as adaptation is also very much important, which was highlighted recent, COP26 as well. So the funding, there are a couple of funding, for example, available: Green Climate Fund, Adaptation Fund, so and so forth. So like many countries, we need to sort of think very quickly the adaptation measures, because it is coming in the near future. So the reduction, sort of like maybe the emission is also important, as well as the adaptation is I think it is very much important at this hour. So now actually the way that we have been discussing so far, like the buildings, or the green, and Dr. Hussain was also highlighting the ratio 1:11. So these are really interesting. So if you just come up with this, the green solutions, so you can sort of like do both while mitigating. So as well as then it helps to adaptation as well. For example, urban, to reduce urban heat island effect. So this is the way that we see. Actually, we need to do both, but more importantly, the quickly. So we need to do sort of like adaptation measures. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. And next we'll go to Tony Lam. I know you talked about this a little bit in your presentation already, but maybe if you have anything to add.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So regarding our Asia Pacific region, that I think that we need to take more action in two big areas. One is the for both the adaptation and the mitigation. I think regarding the real estate or the properties, we need to do some like appraisal or review or assessment that to see where we are. So in terms of the carbon emission performance, and also the regarding the climate risk assessment. So I think we need to do more like we call the baseline, that's where we are now, so that we can plan for the appropriate activities. And the second area is I think we need to do more in Asia is regarding the existing building. So recent years in Asia we did a lot. We see a lot of very good green building, but for the existing building, that's actually this is a very important portion that's induce the carbon emission in the city. So I think that would be quite important to looking at the effective strategies for the existing building in terms of both the mitigation and adaptation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And lastly, we'll go to Dr. Hussain, if you have anything.
Thank you, Louis.
You
would expect me to answer this question, but it's the best mitigation step is to build less. And we can do that. We can do that because we've got clever architects, clever engineers, and other consultants. One of the first thing that we, along this regenerative thinking that we've adopted within Rambo, discussing with our clients, one of the first things is to try and convince them to build less, and to show them how their brief can be satisfied. It can function for them the way they would like it to, but with less floor area. And that is like one of the most important measures which I recommend to everyone to try and do that. On 2 or 3 occasions in the past couple of years, working with Henning Larsen Architects, we've been working together on projects. We've managed to convince clients to build less, and that is like the best mitigating measure, rather than allow the water to come up and continue to build more efficient dams in front of it. It's better to pull the plug on this, and it is possible to do because it can be done. The other thing is to, as individuals and in the marketplace, to try and squeeze as much of the excess out of our own demands on the built environment in this case, and other people's demand. Discourage people from wanting floor-to-floor heights of 4 meters. Now, I'm old enough to have lived in places with floor-to-floor height of 2.8 meters, and we were living quite happily, and people can live quite happily now. Now, developers started on a race of yours is 2.8 meters, mine is 2.9 meters. Oh no, I've got 3.1 meters, etc. And to a point now that most of our existing buildings cannot be adapted because the floor-to-floor heights cannot be sold under the current marketplace. So these are not necessarily technical solutions, but paradigm shifts that we need to have. And I would encourage definitely them over basically sort of building dams for the water that we know it is rising. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, very clear and interesting to think about. I mean, I keep hearing about the housing stock crisis and stuff, but I mean, yeah, there's definitely seems to be enough building around to satisfy. Back, shall we pass to you, Itiong?
Yeah, and the things, it's very sort of like insightful, sort of like sharing by our fellow panelists and speakers. It's like, from Dr. Senaka is, the importance of like adaptation and having the awareness that, there is climate change. We do need to go in to sort of like support and help sort of like countries, nations, cities, towns in combating, or if not in being prepared, for climate change. From Dr. Hussein, talking about like the lacking of courage, to change the paradigm. Is that what we need? Courage. And from Tony, is that how best, to provide the best like technical or technological solutions, to his clients, to developers, to really sort of like mitigate, to slow down, climate change. And the things that, back to speakers, like, maybe just for closing of this session, if there is one sort of like, because you guys are all experts, in the field of sustainability and very passionate, and also very passionate about it. What would your one sort of like statement of hope, maybe to the audiences, or that you would, share, with, your fellow peers, to keep sort of like as a word of encouragement and keep them going, sort of like in combating climate change. Yeah, maybe we could start with Dr. Hussein.
I get highly encouraged and become very positive every time I speak to my grandniece and nephews who are 7 years old. I think the future that these young kids are living in and the paradigms that they have are somewhat different, definitely from mine. A 6-7-year-old tells me that if I want to see an animal, I wouldn't go to the zoo. I should go to the forest. If you want to hear a bird's chirp, you should not keep them in a cage, but go to where they are. And they say this so naturally. So I think that those are the things that we have unlearned. Unfortunately, we've been conditioned, some of us, a little bit more than others. And talking to them, I get encouraged that definitely we will overcome the problem that we have.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hussein. Like connecting with the next generation, that is so important because they truly are the torchbearers. Yeah, and to Tony.
Thank you. So to me, it's very simple that for every little or single things we do or we think, so we have to think one more step. That's towards our environment. That can I'm not talking about the design of building of the works. It's how we consider ourselves. So like our daily life, we go to the 7-Eleven buy a plastic bottom drink, or the very convenient plastic lunch box. So I think every single action before we do it, we need to think about is it good for the environment. So very important is that we work in this industry, building industry. We every day we encourage our stakeholder client to do a low carbon design or etc. But very fundamentally ourselves, what I do every day, we also need to do it from the heart and consider every step when we think about the environment. So just that simple.
Yeah, and the things that, Tony, it really is, what you're saying is it's everyday life. We have got to be conscious of it in our everyday life. Yeah, thank you. And Dr. Senaka.
Thanks. I'll try to be very brief. So I think as global citizens, we are, of course, responsible for this, to combat climate change, or the impact, I mean. So I think my message is let's work together to build a resilience, through various mechanisms, adaptation, whatever we call, so that we can, of course, reduce the future impacts due to this climate change. It's a sort of everybody's responsibility, I would say. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Senaka. Message of together we're stronger, and we can overcome climate change. And yeah, with that, I thank everyone. I thank the audience, and I thank the speakers and the panelists. Thank Louise, Chloe, RIBA Hong Kong, Singapore chapters, and RIBA International. Yeah, for organizing this event. Yeah, thank you all.